Babe, don't take it too serious. It was just a game and I won the bet. The words hit me like a freight train at full speed, each syllable carving deeper into my chest until I couldn't breathe. I stood there in our apartment, with the ring box still clutched in my trembling hand, the 2-carat diamond catching the afternoon light streaming through the windows we'd picked out together. The same windows where we'd watched countless sunsets, where she traced patterns on my chest while we talked about our future. What did you just say? My voice came out as barely a whisper, though inside my head I was screaming. Melissa's face had gone pale, her hand flying to cover her mouth as if she could somehow pull the words back. But it was too late. The damage was done and we both knew it. Behind her, I could see her phone on the coffee table, still on speaker. I could hear muffled laughter from the other end, her friends no doubt enjoying the show. Jack, she started, but I held up my hand. I couldn't hear any more. Not yet. I'd been planning this proposal for months. Every detail had been carefully orchestrated, from the reservation at the restaurant where we'd had our first date, to the private violin quartet I'd hired to play her favorite song. I'd even practiced my speech in the mirror every morning for weeks, wanting to get it just right. Because I loved her. Because I thought she was the one. Because I believed we were building something real together. How long? I asked, my voice steadier now, though my hands were still shaking. She looked down at her feet and I could see tears forming in her eyes. For a moment, hope flickered in my chest. Maybe this was all some terrible misunderstanding. Maybe. 2 years, she whispered. 2 years. Our entire relationship. Everything I thought we'd built together, every moment I'd treasured, every plan we'd made, all of it had been a lie. A game. A bet. The room started to spin and I had to sit down on the edge of our bed. The bed where we'd made love just that morning, where she kissed me goodbye and told me she loved me before I left for work. Where I'd lain awake countless nights, planning our future, imagining our children, dreaming of growing old together. Jack, please let me explain, she said, moving toward me, but I flinched away from her touch. Explain what exactly? I stood up, my voice growing louder. That you've been playing house with me for 2 years? That every time you said you loved me you were lying? That our entire relationship has been some kind of sick joke? The tears were flowing freely down her face now. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. It started as a stupid bet, yes, but then I really did fall for you. Jack, I love you. That part was real. Was it? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. How am I supposed to know what's real anymore? How do I know this isn't just part of the game too? She reached for me again, desperation clear in her eyes. Because I'm telling you the truth now. Because I want to marry you. Because... Stop. I backed away from her, my heart shattering into smaller pieces with every word she spoke. Just stop. I could hear her friends on the phone, their voices growing louder now, probably trying to listen in on our conversation. It made me sick to think they'd been watching us, discussing us, laughing at me this entire time. Every dinner party, every double date, every casual hangout, they'd all known. They'd all been in on it. Get out, I said quietly. What? I said get out. This is my apartment. My lease. Get your things and get out. Jack, please, we can work through this. There is no we, I said, and the words tasted bitter in my mouth. There never was. You made sure of that. I walked to the kitchen and grabbed a glass of water, my throat suddenly parched. When I turned around, she was still standing there, looking lost and broken. For just a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy for her. But then I remembered, she was an actress. She'd been acting for 2 years. How could I trust anything I saw on her face? The bet, I said, my voice cold. What was it for? She hesitated, and I could see her weighing her options, trying to decide what would hurt me least. But I was past caring about that now. A vacation to Europe, she whispered. We all put in money, and whoever could keep a relationship going the longest would win. I felt like I was going to be sick. A vacation to Europe. 2 years of my life reduced to a prize in some twisted game. I set the glass down before I could throw it against the wall. Congratulations, I said. I hope you enjoy your trip. That was 3 months ago, and I haven't spoken to her since. I changed my number, blocked her on all social media, and made sure our mutual friends knew that any mention of her name would result in them being cut off too. I couldn't afford to have any reminders of what I'd lost, or rather what I'd never actually had. The first month was the worst. I barely ate, barely slept, and could hardly focus on my work at the tech startup where I'd been pouring my heart and soul into developing our new app. My colleagues noticed, of course. It's hard to hide that kind of devastation no matter how hard you try. But I couldn't bring myself to explain what had happened. The humiliation was too raw, too fresh. Instead, I threw myself into work with a vengeance. I arrived at the office before anyone else and left long after everyone had gone home. I redesigned our entire user interface, streamlined the code, and added features that would have taken our team months to implement under normal circumstances. It was the only thing that kept the pain at bay, the only time I could forget, even for a few hours, about the massive hole that had been carved out of my chest. My boss, Derek, eventually cornered me in the break room one evening when I was brewing my 5th cup of coffee of the day. "Jack, you've been here 14 hours, he said, looking concerned. "Whatever's going on in your personal life, this isn't healthy." I wanted to tell him that nothing was healthy anymore, that I felt like I was drowning in a sea of lies and betrayal, that every time I closed my eyes I saw Melissa's face and heard her friends laughing. But instead, I just nodded and mumbled something about going through a rough patch. "Take tomorrow off," he said. "That's an order. Get some rest, get some perspective. The app will still be here when you get back." But I didn't want perspective. I didn't want rest. I wanted to work until my brain was too tired to think about anything else, until the memories became fuzzy and indistinct. I wanted to build something real, something that couldn't be taken away from me on a whim. That night, I sat in my empty apartment. It felt so much larger now that her things were gone, and tried to figure out what came next. I'd always been the kind of person who had a plan, who thought 3 steps ahead. But now I felt adrift, like a ship without an anchor in a storm. I started going to therapy the next week. Dr. Sarah Martinez was a small woman with kind eyes and an infinite supply of tissues, both of which I needed desperately. She helped me understand that what I was feeling wasn't just heartbreak, it was grief. I was mourning not just the loss of Melissa, but the loss of the future I'd imagined, the person I thought I knew, the trust I'd placed so completely in someone else. "Betrayal trauma is real," she told me during one of our sessions. "When someone violates our trust so completely, especially someone we loved and planned to build a life with, it can shake our very understanding of reality. It's normal to question everything, to feel like you can't trust your own judgment anymore." That's exactly how I felt. Like I'd been living in a dream for 2 years, and now I was awake and nothing made sense anymore. How could I have been so blind? How could I have missed all the signs? And more importantly, how would I ever be able to trust anyone again? "The answer isn't to never trust again," Dr. Martinez said, as if she could read my thoughts. "The answer is to learn to trust more wisely, to listen to your instincts, and to understand that what happened with Melissa says nothing about your worth as a person. It says everything about hers." But that was easier said than done. Every time I tried to go on a date, which wasn't often, I found myself analyzing every word, every gesture, every expression. Was she lying? Was this part of some elaborate game? Was I being played again? It was exhausting, and after a few disastrous attempts at dating, I gave up entirely. It was better to be alone than to live in constant fear of being deceived again. Work became my sanctuary, and my dedication paid off. Our app launched to incredible success, garnering media attention and investment offers that exceeded our wildest dreams. My role in its development was recognized with a promotion and a significant raise, and suddenly I found myself being headhunted by some of the biggest tech companies in Silicon Valley. "You've become quite the commodity," Derek said one afternoon, scrolling through the emails that had been pouring into his inbox. "Google, Apple, Microsoft, they're all interested in poaching you. But I wasn't interested in being poached. I was interested in building something of my own, something that couldn't be taken away from me. So instead of entertaining their offers, I started working on my own project, a revolutionary social media platform that would prioritize authentic connections over superficial interactions. It seemed fitting somehow, given what I'd been through. I was deep in the coding phase one evening when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My first instinct was to ignore it. I'd become increasingly paranoid about unexpected communications, but something made me look. "Hi Jack, this is Emma, Melissa's friend. I know you probably don't want to hear from anyone connected to her, but I really need to talk to you. Please, Emma." I remembered her vaguely from Melissa's group of friends. Tall, auburn hair, always seemed quieter than the rest of them. She'd been at several of the parties and gatherings I'd attended with Melissa, but we'd never really talked much. She was one of the ones who had known about the bet. One of the ones who had watched me make a fool of myself for 2 years. I started to delete the message, but something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the desperate loneliness that had become my constant companion. Either way, I found myself typing back. "What do you want?" Her response came quickly. "To apologize. And to tell you the truth about some things you don't know. Can we meet for coffee? Please? Just once." Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to ignore her, to block her number and pretend this conversation had never happened. But the truth was, I was tired of being angry all the time. I was tired of carrying this weight by myself. And despite everything, I was curious about what she had to say. Fine. But somewhere public. And I'm only giving you 1 hour. We met the next day at a small cafe downtown, far from any of the places Melissa and I used to go. Emma was already there when I arrived, nervously fidgeting with her coffee cup and looking around like she expected someone to jump out at her. She looked different than I remembered, thinner, more tired. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked up when I approached, and I could see genuine pain in her expression. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." "I'm here," I said simply, not bothering to hide my skepticism. "You said you wanted to tell me the truth about some things. Start talking." She took a deep breath and wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "First, I want you to know that I tried to talk her out of it. From the beginning. I thought it was cruel and stupid, and I told her so multiple times. But you didn't stop her." "No," she admitted. "And I hate myself for that. I should have found a way to warn you or sabotaged it somehow. But she's persuasive. And I was weak. I'm sorry, Jack. I'm so sorry." I studied her face, looking for signs of deception, but all I could see was genuine remorse. Still, I wasn't ready to trust anyone completely. "What else?" I asked. "The bet wasn't just about keeping a relationship going," she said quietly. "That was only part of it. There were milestones. Specific things she had to accomplish to get the full payout." My stomach dropped. "Like what?" "Getting you to say, 'I love you,' first. Moving in together. Meeting your family." She paused, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. "Getting you to propose." The cafe suddenly felt too small, too hot. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, and for a moment I thought I might be sick. "You're telling me that the proposal was worth extra money?" $5,000, she whispered. "On top of the trip." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Several other patrons looked over at us, but I didn't care. I needed air. I needed to get away from this conversation, from this revelation that somehow made everything even worse. "Jack, please don't leave," Emma said, reaching across the table toward me. "There's more you need to know. I've heard enough." "She's planning to contact you," she said urgently. "She thinks enough time has passed that maybe you'll forgive her. She's been asking everyone if they think she should reach out." That stopped me in my tracks. The thought of Melissa trying to worm her way back into my life, of having to relive all of this pain again, made my chest tight with anxiety. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, sitting back down. "Because you deserve to know. Because what she did was unforgivable and you deserve better." She looked down at her hands. "And because I've been thinking about you every day since it happened, wondering if you're okay, wishing I'd been braver." There was something in her voice when she said that last part, something that made me look at her more carefully. Her cheeks were flushed and she was avoiding eye contact. "Emma, I know this is terrible timing," she said quickly. "And I know you have every reason not to trust me or anyone connected to her. But I can't stop thinking about how different things might have been if I'd spoken up, if I'd found a way to warn you or stop her." I didn't know what to say. Part of me was angry that she was bringing this up now, when I was finally starting to heal. But another part of me was intrigued by her honesty, by the genuine emotion in her voice. "I should go," I said, standing up again. "Wait," she said, pulling out her phone. "I want to show you something first." She scrolled through her messages and then handed me the phone. It was a text thread with Melissa, dated just a few days ago. "Melissa, do you think Jack would want to hear from me? I miss him so much." "Emma, are you serious right now? You destroyed that man's life for a bet. Leave him alone." "Melissa, it wasn't just about the bet toward the end. I really did love him." "Emma, then you should have told him the truth before he proposed. You should have ended the bet and chosen him." "Melissa, I was scared. I didn't know how." "Emma, you found a way to lie to him for 2 years. You could have found a way to tell him the truth." I handed the phone back to her, my mind reeling. "You defended me." "Of course I did. What she did was monstrous." She locked her phone and looked at me directly. "Jack, I know you don't owe me anything, and I know this is probably the last thing you want to hear right now, but I'd like to see you again. Not as Melissa's friend, but as me. Just me." I felt a familiar panic rising in my chest. "I can't. I'm not ready to." "I'm not asking you to be ready for anything," she said gently. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that not everyone is going to hurt you. That some of us are capable of telling the truth, even when it's hard. I looked at her for a long moment, trying to read her intentions, trying to figure out if this was another game, another bet, another elaborate deception. But all I could see was sincerity and something that looked like genuine care. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course. You have my number now. If you want to talk or meet for coffee again or just need someone to listen, I'm here. I left the cafe more confused than I'd been in months. On one hand, everything in me screamed to run, to protect myself from another potential betrayal. On the other hand, Emma seemed different from Melissa and her other friends. She seemed real. That night, I called Dr. Martinez for an emergency session. It sounds like you're considering letting someone new into your life, she said after I'd finished explaining the situation. I don't know if I can, I admitted. What if it's another trick? What if she's just as manipulative as Melissa? Those are valid concerns, she agreed. But consider this. What if she's not? What if she's exactly what she appears to be? Someone who recognized that what happened to you was wrong and wants to make amends. But how do I know the difference? You don't at first. That's the risk we take when we open our hearts to another person. But you can take things slowly, pay attention to her actions rather than just her words, and trust your instincts. You've learned a lot about yourself and about relationships in the past few months. Trust that knowledge. Over the next week, Emma sent me a few texts. Nothing pushy or demanding, just casual check-ins and funny memes. She told me about her day at work. She was a graphic designer at a small advertising agency, shared pictures of her cat, and asked how my app development was going. It was nice, normal. The kind of easy conversation I hadn't had with anyone in months. Eventually, I found myself looking forward to her messages. She had a dry sense of humor that caught me off guard, and she seemed genuinely interested in my work and my thoughts about technology and innovation. When she mentioned that she was struggling with a particularly difficult client, I found myself offering advice based on my own experiences in the tech world. 3 weeks after our coffee meeting, she asked if I wanted to see a movie. Nothing romantic, she assured me, just two people enjoying a film together. I almost said no automatically, but something stopped me. Maybe it was Dr. Martinez's voice in my head, or maybe it was just loneliness, but I said yes. The movie was a mindless action flick, exactly the kind of thing I needed to turn my brain off for a couple of hours. Emma bought her own ticket and her own popcorn, and she didn't try to hold my hand or cuddle up to me during the scary parts. She just sat next to me and occasionally whispered funny observations about the ridiculous plot holes. Afterward, we went for ice cream and I found myself actually laughing for the first time in months. She told me stories about her disastrous attempts at online dating, and I shared some of the more absurd startup stories from my work. It felt easy, natural, like talking to an old friend. Thank you, I said as we walked back to our cars. For what? For making me remember what it feels like to have a normal conversation with someone. She smiled, and I noticed that it reached her eyes in a way that Melissa's never had. Thank you for giving me a chance, even after everything. We started hanging out regularly after that. Movies, coffee, dinner at casual restaurants, walks in the park. Emma never pushed for more than I was comfortable with, never tried to rush things or make assumptions about what our relationship was or could become. She seemed content to just be present, to offer companionship without expectations. But I found myself wanting more, and that scared me. One evening, as we were walking around the lake near my apartment, I caught myself looking at her profile in the golden hour light and feeling something I hadn't felt since before Melissa's betrayal. Genuine affection for another person. Emma, I said, stopping in the middle of the path. Yeah. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. She turned to face me fully, her expression growing serious. Okay. Is this another bet? Another game? Are you and Melissa and your other friends laughing about how gullible I am? The question hung in the air between us, and I could see that it hurt her. Her face fell, and she was quiet for a long moment before responding. I understand why you'd ask that, she said finally. And I can't blame you for being suspicious. But Jack, I swear to you on everything I hold dear that this is real. What I feel for you is real. My regret about what happened is real. My desire to be here with you right now is real. How do I know that? Because I'm not asking you for anything, she said simply. I'm not pushing you to commit to me or move in with me or propose to me. I'm not trying to win anything or prove anything to anyone. I'm just here. Because I want to be. Because being around you makes me happy, and I hope that being around me makes you happy too. This was excitement mixed with nerves, the good kind of butterflies that come with anticipating something wonderful. Emma and I went for our usual evening walk around the lake, and I guided us to the bench where we'd sat that first night when I'd asked her about her motives. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and she was laughing at something I'd said about a ridiculous bug report we'd received at work. "Emma," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. "Yeah," she said, still smiling. I got down on one knee right there on the path, pulling out the ring box with hands that were remarkably steady. "2 years ago, you gave me a chance to heal," I said, looking up at her shocked face. "You were patient with my broken pieces, and you helped me put myself back together. You showed me what real love looks like, not the kind that keeps score or has hidden agendas, but the kind that just shows up, day after day, with honesty and kindness and grace." She had started crying, her hands covering her mouth, but I could see the joy in her eyes. "I know I'm taking a risk here," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I know that opening my heart again means opening myself up to the possibility of being hurt again. But I'd rather take that risk with you than play it safe with anyone else. Emma, will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, and then louder, "Yes, of course, yes." I slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, and then she was in my arms, kissing me and laughing and crying all at once. It felt like coming home after a long journey through a dark and difficult place. We set the date for 8 months later, long enough to plan the wedding we both wanted, but not so long that we had to wait forever to start our married life together. Emma threw herself into wedding planning with the same enthusiasm and attention to detail she brought to everything else in her life, and I found myself genuinely excited about the process in a way I never had been before. But of course Melissa found out. I'm not sure how, probably through mutual friends or social media, but about 3 months before the wedding, Emma came home from work looking troubled. "We need to talk," she said, setting her purse down by the door. My stomach immediately clenched with familiar anxiety. Those 4 words still had the power to send me spiraling even after all this time. "What's wrong?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "Melissa called me today," she said, sitting down on the couch next to me. "At work." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Just hearing her name after all this time brought back a flood of emotions I thought I'd dealt with. What did she want? "To warn me, apparently," Emma said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "She wanted to let me know that you're not over her, and that I'm just a rebound, and that you'll never really love anyone the way you loved her." The words hit me like physical blows, and I could feel my old insecurities rising to the surface. What if she was right? What if I was just using Emma to fill the void Melissa had left? What if I was incapable of loving again the way I had before? "Jack," Emma said, taking my hand. "Look at me." I forced myself to meet her eyes, expecting to see doubt or fear or questions. Instead, I saw nothing but love and certainty. "She's wrong," Emma said firmly. "About all of it. I know you love me not because you're trying to replace her, but because of who we are together. And I know you're over her because the man I fell in love with isn't someone who's still hung up on his ex. He's someone who learned from his past and chose to build something better. But what if?" "No," she said, squeezing my hand. "No what if? I know who you are, Jack. I know who we are. And I'm not going to let her poison that with her jealousy and manipulation." "She's jealous?" Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Of course she's jealous. She had something real with you and threw it away for a stupid bet. And now she gets to watch you marry someone who actually deserves you. Of course she's going to try to sabotage it." I felt something shift inside me at her words, a final piece of healing clicking into place. Melissa wasn't the villain in my love story anymore. She was just a sad, bitter person who had made terrible choices and now had to live with the consequences. And I was the hero who had overcome her betrayal and found something better. "I love you," I told Emma, and I meant it in a way I'd never meant it before. Not as a replacement for her, not as a consolation prize, but as the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. "I know," she said, smiling. And that's exactly why she called me. Because she knows it too. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather and a sense of joy I hadn't felt in years. Emma looked radiant in her simple but elegant dress, and as I stood at the altar watching her walk down the aisle, I felt nothing but pure happiness and anticipation for our future together. The ceremony was small and intimate, just our families and closest friends. I had worried that Melissa might try to crash the wedding or cause some kind of scene, but the day passed without incident. We exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, promising to be honest with each other always, to support each other's dreams, and to choose love every day, even when it was difficult. As we shared our first kiss as husband and wife, I felt a sense of completion I'd never experienced before. This wasn't just the end of my healing journey, it was the beginning of something entirely new and wonderful. The reception was held at a small vineyard outside the city, and as we danced our first dance to the song Emma had picked out, something about new beginnings and second chances, I caught sight of someone I hadn't expected to see. Melissa was standing at the edge of the property, partially hidden behind a cluster of trees. She wasn't dressed for a wedding, just jeans and a dark sweater, and she looked older somehow, more worn down than I remembered. Our eyes met across the distance, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of the old pain. But then Emma laughed at something I'd whispered in her ear, and I felt her hand warm in mine, and I realized that Melissa's presence couldn't touch what we had built together. She was a ghost from my past, but Emma was my future. I saw Emma notice her too, saw her face tighten with concern, but I squeezed her hand and shook my head slightly. "Let her watch," I said quietly. "Let her see what real love looks like." Emma smiled at that, understanding immediately what I meant. We continued dancing, lost in each other, and when I looked back toward the trees a few minutes later, Melissa was gone. Later that evening, as we were cutting the cake, Emma's maid of honor, one of the few friends who hadn't known about the original bet, made a toast that nearly brought me to tears. "To Jack and Emma," she said, raising her glass, "who proved that sometimes the best things in life come to those who are brave enough to try again." As we clinked glasses and Emma beamed up at me, I thought about how far I'd come from that broken man who'd stood in his apartment 3 years ago, clutching a ring box and listening to his world fall apart. I'd rebuilt myself from the ground up, learned to trust again, and found someone who loved me not in spite of my scars but because of the strength they represented. A few days into our honeymoon in Italy, Emma got a text message that made her frown and then laugh out loud. "What is it?" I asked, looking up from my guidebook. "One of Melissa's friends just texted me," she said, shaking her head in amazement. "Apparently Melissa's been telling people that our whole relationship is fake, that I only got with you to win you back for her, or some nonsense like that." I felt a familiar twist of anxiety in my stomach. And nobody believes her," Emma said, setting her phone aside and taking my hand. "Because everyone can see how happy we are together. How real this is." I looked at my new wife, my wife, sitting in the Italian sunshine, her hair catching the light, her face glowing with contentment and love. I thought about the journey that had brought us here, the pain that had nearly destroyed me but ultimately led me to something better than I'd ever imagined possible. "She's right about one thing," I said, bringing Emma's hand to my lips and kissing her wedding ring. "What's that?" "This is the best revenge I could have asked for. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I got to win in the end. I got to find real love with someone who deserves it." Emma smiled and leaned over to kiss me, and as the Italian sun set behind us, I felt like the luckiest man alive. I had been broken, yes. I had been betrayed and humiliated and nearly destroyed by someone I'd trusted with my heart. But I had survived it, learned from it, and used it to become a better version of myself. And in the end, that was worth more than any revenge I could have planned. 3 years later, as Emma and I celebrated the birth of our first child, a daughter we named Hope, I received an unexpected email. It was from one of Melissa's former friends, someone I barely remembered from those painful early days. "Hi Jack," it read. "I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I saw the announcement about your daughter on social media, and I just wanted to say congratulations. I also wanted you to know that Melissa never got over losing you. She's been through a string of relationships since then, but none of them lasted. She still talks about you sometimes, about how you were the one that got away. I thought you might find some closure in knowing that she realizes what she threw away. You seem incredibly happy with Emma, and you deserve every bit of that happiness." I showed the email to Emma, who was nursing Hope by the window in our new house. The one we'd bought together, chosen together, made into a home together. "How does that make you feel?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment, watching my daughter's tiny fingers curl around Emma's thumb, listening to the soft sound she made as she fed. I thought about the life we'd built, the love we shared, the family we were creating together. "Grateful," I said finally. "Grateful that she broke my heart because it led me to you. Grateful that she showed me what fake love looks like so I could recognize the real thing when I found it." Emma smiled at me over our daughter's head, and I felt that familiar sense of completeness wash over me. I had been broken, but I had healed. I had been betrayed, but I had learned to trust again. I had been played, but I had won the game that mattered most. And the best part? I hadn't had to destroy anyone else to get my happy ending. My revenge wasn't in Melissa's pain, it was in my joy. It wasn't in her loss, it was in my gain. It wasn't in proving her wrong about me, it was in proving myself right about what I deserved. As I looked at my wife and daughter, at the life we'd built together through honesty and patience and real love, I realized that this was what victory looked like. Not bitter and hollow, but warm and full and endlessly promising. Melissa had won her bet all those years ago, but I had won something infinitely more valuable. A second chance at happiness and the wisdom to recognize it when it found me. The game was over and I had gotten the last laugh after all.